Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports, continuing coverage of Super Bowl 59, live here from Radio Row at the New Orleans Convention Center. Baker Machado, of course, we're interviewing some of your favorite athletes, industry insiders, and also really big executives as well. Steve Bornstein is joining us here at Radio Row. Steve, good to have you here.
Good to be here.
All right, of course, you're over at the president over at Genius Sports. Talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you guys are working on right now.
Well, to me, that we're at the cutting edge of what we're going to do with sports and how consumers are going to consume it.
And how are they? Because it feels like the evolution of that with social media, YouTube, streaming networks continues to get crazier and more cluttered, but more interesting for companies to sort of be created at the same time.
To me, it's the good news is the pie is expanding, although it's fragmenting, and that's the lesson you learn with linear television. That's a lesson you learn with the emergence of digital media. And what we're doing at Genius Sports is trying to figure out how to make content that's more consumable and more engaging in the digital space, and that's what gets me pretty excited.
So what sort of trends are you seeing in terms of how viewers are consuming sports content? Because I feel like now we're at this inflection point in terms of content. People like sports because it's a distraction, especially with news and everything else that's happening in the world. But it's also widening the aperture for more people of diverse opinions and diverse perspectives to be able to be included in all that. So how do you sort of approach content now in the sports world?
Well, what you do is you look at the trends, and the trends is that sports consumption is fragmenting. All entertainment consumption is fragmenting, right? What's a hit show today on television would have been canceled in a millisecond, not only 10 years ago, but 5 years ago. And what we're seeing today is that in order to aggregate larger audiences, you got to put together different packages. And what we're trying to do at Genius is to figure out what the right mix of that digital content we should be creating. And what we're doing is, we call it Genius IQ. It's basically taking the game, capturing the video, and digitizing it, and basically using artificial intelligence to manipulate that and to create customized feeds for consumers.
A lot of people curious what the next iterations of the big companies like ESPN, even NFL Network, two companies that you are very familiar with, are going to look like. ESPN, and this talk of the flagship, almost Netflix-like sort of streaming service that they're going to be creating. How do you sort of feel about the evolution of these networks? And then can these companies like an ESPN charge a $25, $30 a month fee to get users onto their platforms?
Well, I'm not the right guy to comment on what
curious your take.
But they're doing everything right as far as I can see. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to satisfy all the different audiences. So I might be interested in flagship and you may not, or my children may not, because they don't want to spend $30 a month to get that service and they'd rather get it on TikTok. And if you look at what ESPN's doing, they're the number one sports service on TikTok, and that's smart because that's where the consumers is. And so it's the old adage, you fish where the fish are, and that's what ESPN's doing. So they're coming up with different solutions that satisfy every market segment, and that's the only way they can approach it.
Besides the games, and obviously the sports rights and how expensive they are, how much of an impetus for any company, let alone ESPN, is having people like Pat McAfee and Stephen A. Smith as sort of these franchise hosts to be on the platform, and these sort of characters that you sort of have on these networks.
Hey, look, stars matter, and Pat McAfee is the next Chris Berman, who's the next, Walter Cronkite.
Right.
Stars do matter. You try to develop content that's independent of them, but if you want to break through in this world, you have to have people that you're attracted to. Stephen A. Smith is a perfect example of that. He's going to command, I hope, a wonderful new contract and worth every penny of it, because he brings audiences to ESPN, and that's what they need.
Yeah, Stephen A. Smith telling us just a few days ago he is very, very close to signing his deal with ESPN. I'm also curious your take of these sports teams becoming content agencies themselves. Just the other day, the Kansas City Chiefs announcing that they have a production company. We know the Golden State Warriors have one as well. Are we at the mold now where these teams now, in addition to what you put on the field, you have to become a content agency as well?
Yeah, the answer is yes. brands. I mean, an overused word is brands. The Golden State Warriors are a brand, the Kansas City Chiefs are a brand, and they're trying to exploit that and make sure that their fans can reach them. And it's just smart business.
Any expectations or excitement for the game on Sunday? What do you think?
Well, I can't tell you what number Super Bowl this is for me, but it's still as exciting today as it was 40 years ago when I went to my first one.
123.4 million, I think, was the number last year. I mean, obviously,
that sounds low to me. I think it was a higher number.
Was it? Okay, but I was
remember there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So I think the Super Bowl average is over 150 million.
Okay, but do you there's a criticism of us in the media that sometimes we make too much of a big deal about ratings. Do you agree with that assessment?
You're talking to a guy that lives and dies by ratings, so no, you don't make. That's how you know whether you succeeded or not.
Right.
And the answer when I was at the NFL, when we would say we get 150, 160 million people watching the Super Bowl, I looked at that as the glass half full because there are 150, 160 million people that aren't watching the Super Bowl. Yeah. How do we get our number to 350 million? Yeah. That's the objective.
Curious also, before we let you go, the NFL, when it does these deals with Netflix and Amazon and all that stuff, is the importance for them international? Because at one particular point, obviously, you've tapped into the domestic market as much as you possibly can. So is the next sort of evolution for these leagues international rights just to continue to grow?
Well, clearly the NFL has identified that as an opportunity for growth. I mean, and it makes sense. I mean, there are 7 billion, 8 billion people on this planet, and 350 million of them live in the United States. That tells me there's 7.5 billion that are outside of it. So I think that's an important criteria, but, they can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, they're definitely one of the few leagues that can do that. Steve, thank you so very much for joining us here on Radio Row.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. And we got a lot more interviews coming your way. Stick with us here on Front Office Sports.